The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 126 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 23rd of January, 2023, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, I'm joined by Captain Roger, Rob D, and Alex D. Together, we'll discuss scheduling snafus, captain upgrades, complacency on the flight deck, old school training, pilot EKG issues, and the FAA Aero Medical Division. The reason for the FAA system outage, pilot bonuses to Southwest pilots, and more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Before we push back from the gate, I would like to thank Captain Greg Daigle and his son Alex for joining me on our last episode. It was an honor to learn about Captain Daigle's journey and the twists and turns he navigated along the way. Joining us today is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Joining us from the Marriott Marquis in downtown Washington, D.C., where he found classified documents in the closet of his hotel room. Help us in welcoming our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
I swear I had nothing to do with it. I think the bellman probably just put it in the closet and didn't tell me about it. But anyway, we're cooperating fully with the authorities. I do expect the FBI to be knocking on my door any minute now, though.
For sure. Well, also, I can't wait to hear about that.
Wait, hold on. Did you... What hotel did you say I was at? I should have said I'm at the Watergate Hotel. Anyways, keep going. Go ahead.
Not going old school now. Wow. Also joining us today is another exceptional aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, Dassault Falcon 900EZ 2000 pilot, and a G650 commander. He's a captain and director of flight operations and a corporate operator as well. Joining us from the frigid but beautiful snow-covered peaks of Aspen, Colorado, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
You know, every time I hear that intro about myself, I feel really good about myself. You know, all these things that I do or did or something, I feel very important. So I'm feeling very good right now, at least on a personal level. As
you should, my friend, because, if you were here on every single episode, I'd happily add one new thing every single time.
that would mean I had time.
Oh, time.
I'm not sure what time really is. I just know that it goes.
Well,
and I don't have it. It's kind of like money. It goes and I don't have it.
Oh, come on.
There's a lot of similarity between those two things.
I think you make more than all of us. Running that Part 91 airline that you do.
We'll talk to Captain, or we'll talk to Rob D about that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, soon. Big things. Big things. Big things. Well, also joining us today is an exceptional aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a U.S. Navy Reserve's Chief Information Systems Technician, a certified flight instructor, an Embraer 175 pilot for Sandpiper Regional, the alias to one of Legacy Airlines' wholly owned regional airlines. Joining us after a week spent in Vegas, baby, on a 6-day off stretch from his podcast studio in Temecula, California. Please help us in welcoming to the show, Mr. Alex D. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I wish I spent a week in Vegas. It was only a weekend, and I feel like it was a week in Vegas. So, I'm good. It's been nice to actually have some time off and spend time with the family and whatnot. So, it's been great.
Yeah? And did you win big?
Yeah. Totally. I'm such a winner right now in Vegas. Yeah.
So you didn't.
He's back at work, so he's
Yeah, he didn't win
not
today.
counting all his chips.
No. I go to work in 2 days, so I that hasn't fully been counted all yet. So I'll let you guys know what the consensus is. So far, I'm up to 37 cents.
Now, Vegas is definitely a place you go for fun. And did you take the kids, or was this just you and the missus?
It was a whole family adventure. Had some stuff kind of pop up or not pop up as it should have popped up for us on Friday and left us with some time off. So we were going to go out just for like a day or two and then come right back. But ended up working out where we got to spend the weekend there. So it was nice. We took the kids out. We went to this place called Meow Wolf. It's where this basically it's in this place called Area 15, and it's like this whole like entertainment district inside of a building. But the like coup de grace, I guess, if you will, is this mega mart that you can go in. And if you guys have seen it on like TikTok or YouTube, where like you open up the cooler and you go into some back room and there's like, some like industrial like thing. It's actually kind of cool. I could have spent way more time in there just searching around every room. But that was cool. And we got to go to a hockey game while we were out there, go see the Vegas Knights play as a family. So that was fun. The missus and I have a bucket list goal now of hitting all 32 hockey arenas. So far, we've got 2. So
30 to go.
We'll start. Hey,
we got to start somewhere, right?
I in my mind, I thought you were going to say, "Oh, we got 15 or 20." But no, that's cool, dude. I think that's awesome. I wasn't making fun of it. It just in my mind, I was thinking a bigger number. You went 2. I was like,
well, I have 3. So I mean, I've got one up on her. I've been to the American Airlines Center Arena. Which one's in Dallas? Whichever one that is. I've been to that one. So I've got 3. She's got 2. So.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Well, that's a cool thing to do together and be able to knock all that out.
Some people do like baseball parks and stuff. It's cool. Really cool to do hockey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to say thank you again. It was really cool sitting down with you in your childhood home with your dad and learning about his journey in aviation. And man, he's quite the character and he's doing very well.
Right? Like
$500 for his private pilot license?
Yeah.
What?
Well, you also got to remember it was 1970.
Yeah.
So, I mean, times have completely changed. He was talking about getting a plane wet for like $20. And I'm like, that's not even cover the cost of an instructor nowadays.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was saying before we started the podcast, it took quite a while to set up. Normally I'm here in the studio, we're doing a Zoom call and, the audio is, pretty crisp and I don't have to worry about echo and one microphone picking up audio from another microphone. But here I was, throwing everything in a big bin and taking it with me. I had my car was full of stuff and Alex helped me set up. It took about an hour to set all that up.
I have a new appreciation for what you do.
It was, and then we had to like adjust and then we took video too. I haven't had a chance yet to edit any of that stuff because I have been flying, believe it or not, quite a bit. I think I did like 90 hours in January. And then in December was another big one. But and that was a really cool thing. And he was apologizing because he said, I had a stroke earlier last year. And so I might, really struggle to find the next word. And I said, don't worry, we'll edit all that out. And actually he did great.
Yeah. You could tell that he was nervous at the beginning of it, but as he got, more into it, like he started, the stories become more fluid and like he was, stuttering less and all that. It was kind of hard though, because I was trying to keep him on track of his script that we had. And he was like all over the place. So I know the editing for you, Tony, must have been a nightmare, but he did pretty good.
Yeah, honestly, it was a little one of those episodes. So every once in a while you get an episode where you're editing in post-production quite a bit. With him, I only moved one chunk from one area to another so that it would fit more chronologically. But really, there wasn't that much editing other than like the gaps in time and things like that.
I listened to it. It sounded really good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It was super awesome.
Yeah.
He was asking because like when it got released, I told him, and they found it on Spotify, and he was able to listen to it. But he goes, I was trying to find it on YouTube. I was looking for the video, and I was like, wait, hold on. This is Tony we're talking about. He's still back like at least 30
About
episodes.
6 or 7. Well, 6 or 7 episodes back. I still have. They're all in the can, man.
So no, he was just like excited to see the video of it, but he understood once I told him like we do the audio and then Tony released snippets and chunks of the whole show.
Yeah.
So, but he listened to it. He loved it. The one thing he did say was my voice sounds different, and I was like,
really?
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, yeah, I realize my voice sounds different from what I sound like to myself to what I sound like on tape, basically.
Wow. Well, most pilots, they realize that almost immediately when they start talking into a microphone, listen to themselves in their headphones.
I hear my voice, every day. And he goes, I'm used to hearing it and feedback and all that stuff. And he goes, I just don't remember it sounding like that. And I'm like, well,
yeah.
What you sound like. Sorry.
I hope he liked it. That was good.
Oh, he loved it. He had a blast doing it. He said it was fun.
Yeah, so we recorded that, and then the very next day, I went home, I packed, and the very next day, I went on a trip. It was an interesting trip, to say the least. The new year so far has been busy, as I'm sure a lot of people, it's been busy in the industry. And I did this trip on the first week of January that was a little bit butchered. And it was not a bad trip. It was a 4-day trip. Good captain. Didn't have any really out of the ordinary event happen. We did start a new procedure over at Legacy Airlines. And in an effort to... Now, I have a theory. Okay, Alex is dying laughing because he knows all about it. I have a theory. Okay, here's my theory. My theory is that the age 67 rule will happen this year. Put it in the book, put it in, our prediction book, so we can bet on it. I think the age 67 rule will happen by the end of this year. Now, what happens when you're 65 or coming up on 65 and you decide, you know what, this is a career I love doing. I'm going to just keep doing it and I'm going to stay to 67. But the European aviation industry won't allow me to fly into their airspace at age 67. They're putting a cap on 65. They've already said this. Not the JAA, but what's it called now? The European version of the FAA, IACRA, or not IACRA?
ICAO?
No, ICAO would be more like
JAA. I think it's called
JAA, and I think it's something else in the European Union, whatever. Anyway, so
EASA, EASA,
EASA. Yeah, I think that's EASA, something like that. So what's going to happen is these wide body captains on the 777 are going to have to, if you want to stay, you can stay. They'll probably pay protect them, and they'll put them on a domestic route, which means narrow body, right? So now you have a captain who's been doing this forever, who's up there in age. And they're going to come to an narrow body and they're going to have to learn a whole new airplane that maybe they've never flown before. So in an effort to, Rob, what's the verbiage they're using to make everything like a very seamless transition? I forget how they're calling it, but
fleet harmonization.
Thank you. Fleet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Fleet harmonization. So it doesn't matter if you're flying a Boeing or an Airbus or an Embraer, they want all the call outs to be pretty much the same. Okay. So whereas in the past, the pilot flying would take care of certain duties and the pilot monitoring would take care of certain duties. Now they're putting more and more emphasis on the new call outs. So instead of, for example, flaps 1 on the descent, the pilot flying would say, and the pilot monitoring would verify, put their hand on the flap lever and say flaps 1, and then move the lever to flaps 1. That way the pilot flying knows that the pilot monitoring is doing what they asked. It's a challenge response or a request and confirm either way. Now, because of fleet harmonization, the pilot flying will call for flaps 1 on the Airbus. And the pilot monitoring will say, speed verified.
It's a Boeing thing.
And then or speed checks on Boeing. And so now it doesn't matter. Boeing, Airbus, it's all speed verified. So now everybody has the same thing. And
flex, thrust set.
Right. So the pilot flying will call out the thrust mode when they go to take off, right? So, set powers, they say set flex. The pilot monitoring usually says flex set, confirming that they're in fact in flex. Why is that important? Well, let's say it was a toga takeoff. And I said, set toga. The pilot monitoring will confirm that I actually put it in the toga detent, and they'll say toga set. Not flex, not MCT, just toga, right? So now it's just thrust set. Okay, well, you briefed it. Well, that's fleet harmonization. The other little things, like I've been making a lot of PAs lately, because now it's the pilot monitoring's job to make the PAs, because the pilot's flying. He's flying. You can't make PAs when they're flying. Are you kidding me?
Well, you can turn off the lights.
Well, the pilot flying now gets to turn off the lights, something that over at Legacy, the FO would never touch the lights. That's the captain's thing. Then the FO would never make a PA. That's a captain thing. So all this harmonization, there are a lot of changes all at once. And the only training we got was a PowerPoint presentation, a quick reference guide, and a hard date on when we were going to start doing this. And so I got to fly that trip with my captain, and it was fine. We did okay. We kind of, like, he would say, I'd say set thrust, I'd say set flex, and he'd say flex set. I went, what? He'd go set flex set. I'm like, what? Oh crap! Thrust set. I'm like, okay. And we're doing that to each other to get us to move forward. So it's been an interesting few weeks over at Legacy.
Yeah, it's definitely been a combination of both call outs, the old and the new call outs.
Yeah.
I've been watching you guys struggle.
And then we're both
on my
reaching for like the switches at the same time. Like, whose turn is it?
Right.
I don't know. Who's flying? Who's not flying?
Yeah. There's a lot of that, especially on the ground.
Questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. And I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop with two. So if I'm flying a 7.3 and I call for flaps 1, what happens?
The one part is
it like
fleet
flaps 1,
specific.
flaps 2, flaps 3, flaps 4, flaps 4?
No, that's just for the Airbus.
Boeing has 0, 1, 5, 10, 15.
So
20,
much
25,
for harmonization here.
30.
So the harmonization is even in the Boeing, you would call for, say, flaps 15, right? So before.
So this is only harmonization within a manufacturer.
Yes.
Well, they want it so that now in the Boeing you say speed verified, just like you do in the Airbus, where it used to have to say speed checks, right?
Yeah, they just say verified.
Yeah.
Speed verified. Exactly.
My second question. So you've made your age 67 prediction, which is rather interesting. We'll go with that. Why is it that these poor unfortunate souls that are going to get paid for an additional 2 years when nobody else has, that they're going to get pay protected when they fly a different when they go back to a narrow body?
Right. Well, I have a feeling that the company is trying to make that transition as easy as possible for a group that might stay until age 67, because
I don't know why. How does
the European space agencies are saying we're not going to allow pilots to come into our airspace after the age of 65?
So why are we paying them? Why are we paying them for what they're not doing?
Because we have a pilot shortage. So we need them to fly airplanes longer. So hold on. So you have pilots. Your theory is that you have pilots that now that they can fly to 67, they're not going to fly to 67 unless they can get paid as a 777 pilot, because otherwise I'm not doing it. Well, I have a feeling that if they say you can fly to 67, but you're going to have to take a pay decrease to go to a narrow body and go to a narrow body and go to the long-term training, they won't do it.
Yeah. They won't do it.
There's no way.
No.
Unless they have like 5 ex-wives or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what? I bet Alex would do it, and he'd do it for cheaper.
No, I wouldn't. if I got to that point where I was up there and I was flying on a triple, and they said that you can no longer fly the triple, you have to go down.
No, like today, but here's the problem: who's going to replace Alex?
In the future. I care about you now. If I'm Legacy Airlines, or if I'm any airlines, and we got 67 and we have a whole bunch of top heavy pay guys, and I can suck all the guys up from the regionals, you're going to do it for cheaper.
But who's going to replace him?
That's exactly
Who cares?
it.
Well, yeah, if they're a wholly owned operator and they need small airplanes to go into these,
because we're not going to be able to fill the big planes up.
Yeah, the markets.
People from the small markets.
You can't get me to fly the triple without me actually being able to fly the triple outside of the smaller market.
I'm going to make a prediction for this year too.
Oh yeah.
That no matter what happens, you guys are all going to be whiny bitches. That's my prediction. Mark it down.
It's in the book. But I guarantee you.
I am not.
Well, wait. Do we actually need that to be a prediction?
That's a 1-to-1.
That's going to happen regardless.
What are the odds?
1-to-1. Yeah. Give me 3 to 5 odds on that.
So it's been an interesting fleet harmonization transition. Now, the JFK runway incursion, if anybody that has in aviation has received any kind of news, or they're following Kyle's Aviation Business Information Board, they can see that there's audio tapes, there's video. Blanco Lirio, Juan Brown's YouTube channel, he did an excellent review of what we know so far. Of course, there'll be an investigation, and of course, it's going to take a year for the NTSB to release their findings. They crossed the wrong runway. They neglected to make a right turn to cross the runway they were told to cross, and they actually went straight and crossed an active runway, and that could have been disastrous. It was only 1,000-foot separation after Delta aborted, and the separation was not there. That would have been one of the world's most horrendous accidents in a long time.
Yeah.
And it was avoided.
Tenerife.
Well, since Tenerife. Now, my first thought was there's 3 pilots in there. Okay. There's the captain, the FOA and FOB is what they call it. FO1, FO2, the relief FO. For takeoff and landing, all 3 are on the flight deck. All 3 are supposed to be paying attention. And so the FOB at minimum has a check airman view or wide angle view of what's going on. If they're all following along, what the heck's going on up there? Now, I'm not trying to be critical of what happened. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to speculate what happened. Yeah. It's an accident. Guess what? We've all made an accident similar to that, or an incident. We've all made that kind of mistake before. I've actually been a part of a runway incursion at JFK before. It's not hard to do. And I think I talked about that a couple of years ago on the show. And I was very, very, very lucky that I didn't have any kind of disciplinary action against the captain or myself. And so I could totally understand how that could happen. Is it possible that they were worried about fleet harmonization callouts while taxing out?
That's the speculation.
Is it possible?
Yeah. I think that is definitely a factor, but I also think that this is a perfect demonstration of expectation bias.
That also is
coupled with the complexity of the new checklist.
Yeah, and loss of situational awareness. I mean, we can go on and on and all the threat and error management factors that were not caught.
And not to say that the crew wasn't, in the wrong here. Obviously, just, placing immediate blame and be the crew. But I'd hate to say that because they're our fellow pilots. But the other thing I hate that nobody's even talking about is why wasn't the ground controller paying attention either?
Right. Hey, you went the wrong way. I mean,
you're not where you're supposed to be.
It's a triple. They're not taxing at the speed of heat. It's not Southwest where they're zipping around like a freaking Vespa in Rome. They're taxing really slow. It's a 777. It could have been caught. So the ground monitor wasn't
blame on them, but it's still, there's a little bit of liability that I think the ground controller needs to accept because they were holding short of a runway. So there was some time, and I believe you're supposed to check that the runway's clear before you cross anybody and then see where that guy's going to cross. But
and what's the automated lights? that's the big
the
debate.
runway status lights.
The runway status lights, were they working? Or why did they not go off?
There's a lot of questions there because, what was planned on the TPS, what was briefed, what was loaded into the box, those big things are right there. What was displayed on the ATIS? Because in that configuration, yes, they were departing 4 left, but they routinely depart 3-1 left at Kilo Echo.
Yeah.
In that configuration.
Yeah.
So, a big heavy probably would want to use full lengths, but anyway.
And then what's one thing we do as first officers, at least those of us that are first officers, we take our Jeppesen EFB and we draw the little green or whatever color line you choose for the day, and you draw the line on your 10.9 page on your taxi diagram. And if you have a GPS signal, which is questionable, but let's just say you're following along and you draw the taxi route out, or you write down the taxi route, you have all these barriers.
Geo reference? I assume that's what you were asking about or wondering about the GPS signal. I mean, do you have geo referenced?
Yeah,
we do. However, the 777 doesn't have adequate geo reference. So I've heard from all the pilots. The iPad's GPS antenna.
Oh, it just comes from the iPad's internal antenna, so it actually only works on the ground anyway.
Well, when you
it works in the air
coupled
too.
with the Wi-Fi, or even in the air, it works with it too. So
it should work. And as a matter of fact, our standard operating procedure for the EFBs over at both Sandpiper and Legacy, that those that have it on that fleet, is that at 80 knots upon landing, the accelerometer and the GPS that's built into the tablet will determine when you reach 80 knots, and it'll automatically put the moving map display on your tablet. You don't even have to reach over and tap it or anything. So as soon as you clear the runway, even if your both hands are occupied doing stuff, it should be there.
Yeah. So like before I land, I kind of expand the airport moving map right around the area that I plan on turning off.
Yeah, I do the same.
And then so that when I go to the approach plate, as soon as I get below 80 knots, boom, it populates the moving map right around the area that I was expecting to turn off.
Yeah. So a lot of questions involved here.
Yeah.
It was my biggest curiosity in all of this, the discussions I've been having lately with my flight crew, is part of one of the threats in this situation going to be placed on this new checklist that, this fleet harmonization that we weren't really trained. We didn't have a day of training for this. We were just told, here's a PowerPoint presentation. And it's not like it's one thing. Okay. It's not like it's one thing. It's like every single phase of flight has changes from pre-departure all the way through parking. So we'll just have to.
Here's my just guessing. If I were to guess what happened here, which I don't think we should be doing any of this, but I'm gonna.
But we're gonna.
We're gonna. Here's my gut feeling. So I have a feeling that they actually had 4 left loaded into the box, which was the proper runway. They wanted to do 3-1 left, so they briefed 3-1 left, but they never received the TPS data for 3-1 left. So on the taxi out, what does the first officer do? Forget all the data,
balance,
load it into the box,
absolutely.
Weight balance, run the numbers, goes heads down at the hold short line and gets a little disoriented because you're trusting the 30-year, single digit captain that's driving the airplane that's been doing this forever.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 35 years. Knows where he's at in JFK, which I think that was their home base, right? So, which is another holy crap moment, right?
Yeah.
And then, got the clearance to cross. I believe the female FO answered the radio for the crossing clearance, and they crossed the runway. And meanwhile, now she's like, "Holy shit, I got to make a PA."
Because now that's the FO's job, right?
Yep. Man. Yeah.
Flight attendants prepare for takeoff.
Lots of essay. Yep.
Yeah, so we went from the FO being busy on the ground to the FO being busy and responsible for the pre-departure PAs as well. So
crazy.
Well, enough about that. Let's this trip that I took, we experienced this, and Rob, I'm sure you've been experiencing these changes as well. It's just a pain in the butt. I think I've got it down now. It's been 2 weeks since then, and 2-3 weeks, and I think I've got it down. But in this particular trip, what I really wanted to talk about is this reassignment thing that happened. We did a Pittsburgh layover on day 1. It was a nice trip, nothing big. It was a 2-leg day. So left Ontario around 1:00 in the afternoon, went to Dallas, didn't really have a very long sit, just enough time to swap airplanes, and then head out to Pittsburgh. The next morning, we did a Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Charleston, Charleston to Charlotte, Charlotte to Des Moines. 4 legs.
And sound like me.
It was a full day.
Yeah. Regional trips.
Got done at 10:00 at night. Next day, all we had to do was Des Moines to Charlotte. Now, conventional wisdom states that anytime you're going to a base and you only have 1 leg for that day, you are in the right for reassignment. And guess what happened? En route from Des Moines to Charlotte, we got a ding. You are now not laying over in Charlotte. You're going to fly Charlotte to Atlanta on a delayed flight where the crew timed out. Captain and I looked at the schedule and go, do we want to do this? Should we do this? What happened was it would remove 2 legs from day 4. So we would only have to do 2 legs on day 4 and be home on time. And we're like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's not like we've been flying a bunch. We only had 1 leg. So we're supposed to go to a gate in Charlotte, and they changed our gate right before we landed so that our airplane would park next to the Atlanta flight so that we, as pilots, didn't have to walk across the airport. We could just go next door. And when we pulled into the ramp area, the ramp agent said, hey, can you please just pull in behind that A321 that just pushed off your gate? And as soon as they clear, you're going to park at that gate. And we're like, yeah, sure. Meanwhile, we're standing behind them. They're sitting there. They're getting 1 engine running. They're running their flows and their checklists and everything, getting ready to go. And some other aircraft, because, about banking, that's when, we get a bunch of airplanes all leaving around the same time. We get a bunch of planes coming in all around the same time. That way, connections can be tighter. Oh, efficiency. So we start hearing other airplanes that are in that alley call for push. 1 airplane, 2 airplanes, 3 airplanes. Next thing you know, 6 airplanes all called for push, and their push was held because they're waiting for us to clear, and we're waiting for the aircraft in front of us to clear. And a few minutes go by, and the ramp agent, gets on the radio and says, "Hey, Legacy, are you ready to go up there?" And they're like, the FO answers and goes, "The captain's on the phone with maintenance. It's going to be a minute." Now, personally, if I'm in command of an airplane that's blocking an entire alley because they were right in the joint of the base of the alley, I'd probably go, well, if I can move the airplane, let me move the airplane, go to the hard stand, call maintenance. That way we're not blocking anything. They're not asking us to move, and we can take our time and run this. And if we have to go back to a gate, we'll go back to a gate. But that's not what happened here. Now, we don't know what their maintenance issue was. It could have been an engine. It could have been a brake issue. It could have been, hey, I better not move this airplane. It's not safe. We don't know. They didn't speculate. I'm sorry. They didn't indicate what it was. However, 20 minutes went by, and now everyone's kind of losing their patience. And we finally get to the gate. Now, mind you, that aircraft that we flew into Charlotte had an MEL'd APU. Now, Rob, lately, how many MEL'd APUs have you had?
Lately, not that many, but
really,
they're a pain in the butt. Yeah,
I've had 3 in the last 3 weeks. 3 airplanes. But I don't know what it is.
No, I haven't had that many.
So when your auxiliary power unit is MEL'd, it's deactivated, meaning you don't have APU bleed for an engine start. So you have to do an external air start and then a cross bleed start. And when you get to the gate, you can't shut down one or both engines because you'll lose power. The airplane will go dark and you won't have all their safety, fire suppression stuff. So what you have to do is wait for the jet bridge to attach. Then they lower the boom with the GPU connector, the ground power unit, and they'll plug you in. Now, once we parked at the gate, mind you, now we're kind of like, okay, we're late now and everybody wants to get off the plane. We've been delayed here on the ramp. Tensions were getting a little bit high. And the jet bridge is moving. I'm reading our checklist, our shutdown checklist. I complete the checklist. I look at the captain and I go, yeah, they're connecting the jet bridge. I'm going to jump out and use the lav real quick. I had to go. I come out of the lav and the jet bridge door is still, the door is not opened yet. And I asked the number one flight attendant, what happened? She goes, oh, she put the jet bridge on crooked and she opened the door, but it only would open like 2 inches because it hits the side of the jet bridge. She needs to realign the jet bridge. I went, okay, that's interesting. So I turn around and go inside the flight deck, and the captain's hanging out of the side window going, no, I need power. I need power. I can't. No, I don't have an APU. I need power. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, they want to move the jet bridge, but they can't move the jet bridge unless they disconnect the ground power, but I don't have power. I'm like, oh, great. So they're like, okay. He makes a PA. He tells everyone, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go without power just for a moment because they need to move the jet bridge. So they raise the boom with the GPU cable, and the jet bridge won't move. And she's at it, like the agent's at it, and now the supervisor comes over and he's at it, and the jet bridge won't move. So he's like, give me power. It's been too long. Give me power. You'll figure it out later. Go get me a portable or something. They're like, well, we don't have any right now. Sorry, Captain. So he's yelling out the side of the airplane. So we get more power, and it turns out that they didn't disconnect the air hose from the jet bridge. The jet bridge won't move if the air hose is extended or the power cord is extended.
Oh, they already pulled that thing out, huh?
So the captain goes, listen, we're going to try this one more time. First, disconnect the air. Reel it in. Then let me know when, and we'll disconnect the power. You can move the jet bridge a foot or whatever you have to move it, and then give me power again. So we're not in the dark here. It's at night. So what do? Okay, I can disconnect the power now, Captain. He goes, fine. So he disconnect the power. And then they decide to disconnect the air hose, and that takes a while for it to reel back up into the jet bridge. So now we're just sitting here just scratching our heads going, this is like a freaking clown show, man. No wonder we have a certain reputation over at Legacy Airlines. This is ridiculous. So we finally got everything hooked up. Okay. This is like about 40 minutes after we landed. Now we're delayed even more. And we're just thinking those flight attendants over at that other airplane are probably pissed because they probably boarded up and they've been sitting there, because they don't get paid during boarding. They only get paid when the door closes, right? So we walk over there, and the flight attendants were smart. They said, don't you dare board this aircraft until both the captain and the first officer are on the jet bridge. So that's what happened. So we get down there, and sure enough, we boarded up. We push off the gate, and we go through our flow. And part of the flow for the first officer is to check the status page. Now, the status is where any malfunction that's not a major malfunction or a caution or a warning or a previous malfunction that was deactivated would appear. You're not supposed to have that kind of stuff. So I'm doing my after start flow, and I have a circuit breaker popped on the rear circuit breaker panel, K through Y or whatever it was. And so we both look at that, and we both turn around and look at the circuit breaker panel, and I go one by one with my hand. I run it across the circuit breakers to make sure that none of them are popped or maybe partially popped. And I'm like, nothing's popped, Captain. And what does he do? He goes, well, let's go and park in the stand so we're not blocking the aisle or the alley, and we'll call MOC and find out what they want us to do. So sure enough, we went out there. We called MOC, and they said, go back to the gate. We need to figure out one of these monitored circuit breakers says they're tripped. And I said, okay. So we went back to the gate and ran a checklist, and here comes a team of maintenance people because now we're really delayed. And they popped a big circuit breaker panel behind the first officer's seat, and I have a picture of it. It's pretty amazing. And all live. We had power on the airplane. It was all live. And he had to check one by one every single circuit breaker. And once he checked all that, then he could offer the MEL that the message should not be there. Wow. So, some time went by, right? About 40 minutes. I had my phone on. Captain had his phone on. We're just sitting there talking about, okay, what time are we going to actually get to the hotel tonight? What's our layover going to be? How many hours of sleep are we going to get tonight? So here we are cutting into our rest time. So it's time to go. Okay. So we push off the gate at 7:42 p.m. and we taxi out, run our checklist, and we take off. When I landed in Atlanta, after we got to the gate, I ran a checklist and I turned on my phone. 7 missed calls from crew scheduling.
Jesus.
So the captain's like, dude, really? You got 7 missed calls? I'm like, look, I hadn't even listened to the voice messages. I just got the text from it saying, we're trying to reach you. This is your first attempt. You're being reassigned. You're going to Orlando. I'm like, what?
What?
Here's a second attempt. Why aren't you answering the phone? You're going to Orlando. We need you to go to Orlando. It's at this gate. Oh. Call us back. Third attempt. We really need you to call us back. Okay. So I say, Captain, do you mind? Can you check the NS and see if I'm actually on this flight? Because I don't know what's going on. They think I'm in Charlotte. And he goes, no, you're not. It's some new hire FO with the big P next to their name. It means they're probationary. And I was like, oh, crap. So I checked my schedule, and sure enough, I'm not supposed to be in Atlanta. I'm supposed to be in Orlando. So I'm like, do you mind if I call him right now? He goes like, go ahead. We got to wait for the flight attendants anyway. We go to the hotel. I'm like, okay. So I call crew scheduling, and let's just call her Karen. Karen answers the phone. I say, hi, Karen. This is Tony. I'm calling you back. I just landed. She's like, where are you? I just landed in Atlanta. Hold on. So I'm on hold. Collect all my things, pack up my bags, step out on the jet bridge, wait for the flight attendant, finish deplaning. She goes, never mind. Since you ignored our calls, I'll just put you back on your schedule. And I said, excuse me, hold on, wait. What's going on with my schedule? She's like, well, you were ignoring our phone calls, so you're back on your schedule. Click. The captain's looking at me smiling, going, don't even worry about it, bro. He goes, it's not your problem. You're not even responsible to answer your phone. That's not your responsibility. They have to have positive contact before they even touch your schedule. And I go, wait a minute. And I'm looking at the very first phone call, the first attempt. Now, mind you, I said that we pushed off the gate at 7:42. The first attempt was at 8:15. I was airborne.
So you're airborne.
So yeah. They didn't even know I was on flight. I was in the air. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
It bothered me. It bothered me because, it shouldn't have, because it's their error, and it's no harm, no foul, right? But it bothered me because she's like, well, you're ignoring our phone calls. And I don't play that game. Not that it matters. So the next day, I went to the chief pilot's office in Dallas. Now, not my chief pilot's office, but the chief pilot's office in Dallas. Because I had about a 2.5 hour sit. So I'm like, hey, is there a chief pilot I could talk to here? Oh, okay, what's it about? I'm like, I just want to talk to you about something that happened with my schedule. He's like, come into my office. So I said, I'm like, look, I don't want any phone calls to be made or anything. I just need to get this off my chest. Once I tell somebody that, in management about this, I'll feel better. And that's all that really I'm here for.
Yeah.
And I told him what happened. And he just leans back in his seat and he goes, you don't even need to have a cell phone, my friend. He goes, I wouldn't sweat it. He goes, now, she was very rude to you. And if you want to at least tell her supervisor, Karen's supervisor that, that's no way to talk to us. We're not, playing games. And I said, no, I'm not, it's not a big deal. But it did bother me to the point where this morning I felt, I'm going to go talk to you about it. And then I said, so anyway, how are things going? How do you like this integration of our fleet harmonization? And he said, yeah, a couple pilots were removed from flying because they refused to update their manuals and incorporate that stuff before the trip.
Oh, man. what a mess.
Yeah. So that's
crazy.
That diatribe was what I've been up to.
Yeah. That sucks, man.
Wow.
I hate those situations. You know, it's like there's no reason to talk to people that way to begin with, you know. No. I think obviously they're stressed out over there, and
yeah,
they're probably just trying to fill all those peg holes with all the missing crews, but there's no way to talk to another employee.
No, not at all.
Well, he said that like 70% of the crew schedulers over at Legacy are all probationary right now. They're all new.
Yeah,
they're
all brand new.
They're really trying to bring the number of crew schedulers back up after COVID, and they're having a hard time. So it's no excuse, but it's just tough when you do an honest day's work. You're professional. You love your career. You love the people you work with, and then somebody who's on your, dare I say the word, I hate this word, team, that just treats you like you're playing games and you're not. It's just, Roger sits there is like, yeah.
It's like, what the hell?
Roger has the management leaning back in his chair.
Yeah. He's like, yep, don't worry about it.
Is that all?
Now,
all you got, Tony?
So, and again, I'm crew scheduling too. So
you wear many hats, Roger.
That's right.
Now, Rob, you've been busy with volleyball schedules again.
Tell me about it.
And in the middle of one of my sits in the DF and W, I'm looking at the vacancy bid that came out. And what do you have to say about that, young man?
Well, I'm just happy to report I've been awarded Captain DFW Airbus 320 domestic. So,
yay!
Long time coming. 6 years here at Legacy, which that's nothing relative to the crowd, but
6 years of Legacy.
6 years here at Legacy, and then I guess 17 years or so, since I started this job.
17 years at a Part 121 airline. One job interview.
Finally made it to one. Yep. One interview. Finally made the Legacy captain. So, well, I've been awarded Legacy captain. So, it's pretty fired up.
Yeah. Well, we are looks like, very, very
April
proud of
training
you.
Class. Well, thanks, man. I think you're next.
Tony's next.
Yeah, and I made a post on the Squawk Ident Instagram page, saying, the view from this seat's great, but I wonder what the view is from the other seat. I could, a couple years ago, I could have, we both could have gone to the East Coast and held a left seat position. I did that with Sandpiper, I know, as Rob did too, and I don't want to do that again, especially at this point in my career. So. Maybe by this time next year, something in the vicinity of this side of the continent, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll just move to Charlotte.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
be finally able to be the one in charge again, because there's a lot of great guys, but don't get me wrong, there's some of them there that are just hard to deal with, and they make this job a lot harder than it really is.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
I think that's the best part of upgrading and sitting in the left seat. It's not the money, it's not the uniform, it's not the prestige. It's the fact that you set the tone on the flight deck.
Yeah.
And
totally.
It's all about your leadership, your professionalism. And, if you have a easygoing, open kind of door policy flight deck and you treat everybody with respect, the job is so much, it's so pleasurable to come to work and fly, and nothing really bugs you. It kind of just rolls off. You roll with it, Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Or it could,
man,
you can make it as hard as you want.
Can't wait. Yeah.
But something else happened to you. You were telling me about you were doing a Santa Ana to Austin, and something got a little scary there for a minute. What happened?
Yeah, man. Well, it didn't get scary, but it definitely drives home the the idea that we need to pay attention to what we're doing at all times and not get complacent up there. You know, we've been, like I said, doing it for 17 years, 6 years here at Legacy, and complacency hit me and the captain the other day on our way to Austin from Orange County. Because of turbulence, we had been filed initially at a low altitude, 24,000 feet, and it was bumpy. I mean, there was no smooth rides out there. So even at 24,000 feet, we were, just getting our butts kicked. And we were scheduled to climb to a final cruising altitude of 36,000 feet, somewhere around the Phoenix area. And and then also along with that, the jet stream was about 130 knots on the tail up to that altitude. So all the field planning was predicated around that step climb. And anyway, it was night. We're headed to Austin. I think our estimated time of arrival was about 11 p.m. And we're cruising along. And, I did a couple of, and that was the other thing. We also had it wasn't really a shortcut, but we got cleared direct to El Paso.
Oh, okay.
Early on in the flight. And we did the beams, but, I think I did one or two, maybe 3 fuel checkpoints, and we got our lunch or dinner. Mm-hmm. Started eating that, so I kind of put that aside. Of course, I didn't do any checkpoints while I'm eating dinner. And then put the dinner down. We're getting our butts kicked. We're trying to find a smooth altitude. One thing led to another. We finally got smooth ride, and we just, we're like, whew, thank God. We're cruising along. And then we look down at our fuel state, and it says we were going to land with 4,000 pounds. We were supposed to land with like 9 or 10,000 pounds, I think.
Okay.
So we were low.
Yeah.
We were a lot lower and we were in a 319. So, I mean, probably at the very, very minimum you want to land that airplane with, definitely want to have it around 5,000 pounds or so.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 or 6.
But yeah. So
wait, 4,000 pounds is low?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's very low for us.
That's a normal landing for us.
Well, yeah, but look,
on a 321, you don't want to land with anything less than 6,000, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was pucker factor for a second. I'm like, all right, let's get into the performance charts and figure out what long range cruise is. And immediately I said, I'm going to slow this plane down, get it close to green dot for a long range cruise, and then let's figure out what the hell we're doing here. I'd rather sip gas at, the best lift over drag ratio we got, which is, I guess, green dot, and then figure out what we need to be doing. Should we climb up or whatever? And then ATC saw our speed reduction. They're like,
hey, Legacy, say your speed.
Yeah, we're slowing to like 6.7, 6.8 for a few minutes. We need to figure out, we're having we're not having an issue. We figured out there's a miscalculation with our fuel, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. So like, all right, let us know if you need any help. And then we figured out, all right, we just keep going. We're going to be fine. So we just dialed it back up and kept going.
Now,
so we just said, hey, we're min fuel. We're min fuel, and we can't accept any undue deviations. They're like, all right, where are you going? Austin. All right, clear direct Austin. Boom. So we just went direct to Austin.
Yeah. And what did you land with? Do you remember?
It was like 4,300.
Wow, it was pretty low. Now, could you have climbed up to 36, or was it too late in the game already?
The problem, I think, we would have burned the gas getting up there.
Mm.
We would have wasted probably the amount of gas we would have saved from, that short period of time, because the top of descent was like, we were probably less than 100 miles away from our top of descent. Oh, yeah. So if we would have climbed up, it would have been just coming right back down, so we wasted it. So we figured, try to do the best optimum descent we can from 26,000 feet. Got cleared direct. And but the good news was landed in Austin. My kid was having a volleyball tournament that weekend in Austin. So
lucky.
Coincidentally, my hotel was right by the Austin Convention Center where they were holding the event.
Yep.
So it was a long overnight for us. Didn't have to report till 7 p.m. the next day. So I was able to watch a handful of matches with my wife and my daughter. We went out and sampled some of the local cuisine. Actually, it wasn't even local cuisine. It's Gus's fried chicken. Anybody ever have that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, that stuff is good. That was the first time my wife had it, and she was like, holy mackerel, this is amazing. So, I got to hang out with the wife and kid, and then got back, took a quick cat nap, and then flew Austin to Boston. Landed pretty late there, and had a good overnight. Then next day was Boston to Charlotte to Dallas, and it was really uneventful, other than a nice stiff headwind and a little bit of chop on the way back. So but yeah, that Orange County to Austin trip was definitely gave me a little reality check to start paying attention a little more than I have.
Yeah.
So what you're saying was the pucker factor was a little real?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely catches you, because I mean, it's like, man, what? Obviously, you can land somewhere. I mean, we're out in West Texas. I mean, we had, I think we're probably just passing. We were between El Paso and Austin, so we were coming up on. Should we go to we could go to San Angelo. We can go to, any of those Midland, any of those airports, Abilene, something like that along the way. But those were still kind of far away. But I mean, plenty of fuel to get to those places. But it said we had 4,000 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. 4 is kind of low, but not like unheard of. I mean, the Neo sometimes in the Neo were landing with like 46, and that's still like an hour, 30 minutes of fuel in the Neo. Well,
the other thing is too, is I always remember this, and we haven't had to do it too much here at Legacy, but remember when you had to actually burn fuel to get below your landing weight?
Oh yeah.
And it seems like it would take forever.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to burn it, you're turning on the APU, you're dropping the gear, dropping a notch of flaps, floating some spoilers. And still you're like 10, 15 minutes of just chugging around trying to burn that gas off.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking, if we need to conserve fuel, we can do this easily. Just delay flap extension, just ride it at green dot, downwind base. And then, once you get on final, just start configuring. And so we did that, and it worked out pretty good. But, I guess the other funny thing, which just triggered my memory, is when we were turning, we were on base, and the controller asked if we had the runway in sight. So I looked, and I didn't see it. And my captain, God bless his heart, he thought I gave him a nod, and I just didn't see it. He's like, "Yeah, we got it in sight." And they're like, all right, cleared for the visual. So I just reached up and hit approach.
Yeah.
Turned on the second autopilot. And I'm like, and we were high.
Oh.
Because, I'm trying to do an optimum descent.
Yeah.
And we were a little high, and we weren't fast. But, I mean, I was not where I would have normally been for a normal approach, for configuration. And so I'm looking, I'm like, dude, I don't see the runway over there. He's like, oh, we need to get down and get configured. And I'm like, well, then flaps one, gear down. Then.
That's it. That's it.
Speed brakes come out.
It's shuttle landing.
Yep. Flaps 2, flaps 3. So and then again, it was his first time with the new call out. So he's like,
speed verified.
Flaps 1, and he's like, darn it, verified. Yeah. And then when I landed, when I did the rollout, I had the brake set for low, auto brake set for low. And I said, watch this, manual braking.
And did he say auto brake off?
Well, he said, oh, are we supposed to say that now?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
You saw that?
You were supposed to say stable for me at 1,000 feet too. But anyway, we'll cover that
that's
later.
Another thing. So that 1,000-foot call, the pilot flying would say stable. And part of that was because you wanted to make sure they're still alive over there. And now the pilot monitoring at 1,000 feet, they go stable. And at 500 feet, they go stable.
Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll change a little bit here too. Now Roger has been patiently listening to our stories and
Craziness.
and I was eating my crew meal and I stopped doing the fuel planning and crew scheduling was calling me, and he's sitting there patiently, not being judgmental. I appreciate that, Roger.
No, not at all.
He's such a good guy, man.
Roger,
wonderful man.
What have you been up to? Now, we were joking around about the old school training and the Part 91 airline that you're running. What's going on?
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
But you guys talk a lot about flying. I mean, it's kind of weird how, you had asked, before we'd actually started, what I've been doing. It's like boring stuff. Like the flying, it's such a different thing. Everything you guys do is flying based. Everything. And you guys, in the end, you guys do more flying than I do because that's all you do. But I do the administrative stuff. And it's boring that nobody wants to hear about it. But that's what I spend more of a significant amount more time doing that stuff than I do actually flying the airplane. The flying the airplane, that part's easy. I think for the month of January, what are we? January 23rd, I did a trip to Cancun, and I'm now in Aspen. Mm-hmm. I had a day trip up to Truckee also, and that's about it. But I've been swamped. We've got a guy that's got to go in and because we have 3 different aircraft types. I'm typed in the 3 different planes, and we have different crew members that are typed in different things. And one of the guys, our most recent hire, actually is not typed in our smallest airplane, which everybody is, and so he's got to get that done. And we're just kind of doing that on his own. And he's going to go up for a traditional check ride with a DPE. It's not a not any DPE can do this, because obviously he's got to be FAA approved in that aircraft type. But I got to do some in-aircraft training for him to be able to do that. So trying to get him into the airplane to get experience before we go up and then do all the maneuvers that you have to do on any check ride. So a lot of time trying to figure out the logistics on how to get him where he needs to go. We did have an aircraft with a maintenance issue just about a week ago that required some airplane swaps. Not something that you talk about in the corporate or the Part 91 world, but with, we've now got 4 airplanes and 8 pilots, and things do happen, and they require manual crew swaps and manual airplane swaps. So that was something that I was doing also. Like I say, it's boring stuff. And then I got to go to Cancun and hang out in Cancun. Then I got sick. Montezuma came. Fortunately, Montezuma it was like Montezuma Junior.
Wow.
It was not bad, but that kind of spoiled that a little bit. For about it. Fortunately, it was the day before we left. And then the guy that I was flying with, he got it the day after when we were flying, and
that's not fun.
That's awesome.
Again, not horrible, but definitely, his presence was there.
This is the good thing about having you on the show, though, is it's easy to sit here and talk about what we know, and I think a lot of listeners are in the industry. All 6 of those Squawk Ident listeners are in the industry, I think, and a few are probably not, and they're deciding, what avenue I want to go fly the big airplanes or whatever they want to do. But not everybody wants that. Some people want to fly corporate. And what they don't realize is that, you could be a contracted out pilot and just have to worry about the pilot stuff. But even at that level, you're going to do flight plans and file and check the weather. And if you get to the point where you're up there in your company's seniority and you're in charge of really taking care of all the logistics of flying. Whereas Rob and Alex and I, we don't worry about the logistics. We worry about
there certainly is
our
a lot more variability in my job, if you will. Now, kind of like you said, though, just within the Part 91 world, there's a huge variability on what people do. We have pilots that fly for us, and they kind of they're very much like you guys. Yes, they still need to do some flight planning, and they need to do catering. They got to get the coffee, or they need to make sure that there's bottled water. And so there is additional stuff that you guys don't do, but still they're much closer to that. It's just kind of, where you end up. And I didn't try to be here. It's just one of those things that happened, and it's come up on the show before about all the stuff that I do, and by the time I go flying, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not what most people would do. I guess the best way I could describe it is I fell into it because I could fix the problems, even though I wasn't trying to climb the ladder, if you will. It was just,
Right.
I fixed the problems, and I guess that I was good at it. I guess I am. If I'm really actually being honest, I am pretty good at it. And that comes with its pros and its cons too. I do a whole lot more work than
Yeah.
than other people.
Well, we've known each other for 20 years now, and in those 20 years, you're a fixer by nature. You love the challenge of taking care of.
It does keep me mentally engaged, I guess, which is probably a good thing. Like, it's not just the mundane. Admittedly, yes, when I was flying the 121, it was mundane. You show up, you do the same stuff. You guys are going through that right now with Legacy Airlines, and it's not just you guys. It's all of the Legacy Airlines. I'm sure are doing kind of the same stuff where they're trying to smash everybody into the same mold. They take kind of all the flight crew decisions away, because this was happening 10 years ago.
Yeah,
and where they pretty much take a lot of the decision making away, and they fit everyone into this mold, and we're going to try and do everything the same. And you can't do that, especially with the Legacy Airlines that have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different aircraft types.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do some of this stuff, but I digress.
Well, it was interesting to hear that here you're doing training in the airplane, not in a simulator, and it must possibly, I'm guessing, because it's more cost effective.
It actually was more timing related. Because of the backlog in training at some of the simulator things, it was just faster to get him through with the aircraft, of which is through a company that we've used. It's actually the company I did my initial type through.
Okay.
However many years ago that was.
Yeah.
And it was just because we could get his check ride done earlier. And then he's actually scheduled to go for some simulator in just a couple months also, except it will actually be a recurrent, even though there's no regulatory necessity for him to go. There is some obvious advantages to going through the simulator, because you definitely do not do the stuff you do in a simulator in the real airplane.
Right. You're not going to shut down an engine.
Nobody in their
single
right
engine
mind is
approach
do that.
to a go around.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there is the benefit of that. And so he's scheduled for that as well. But now we can only do a 4-day recurrent instead of a 2, whatever it is, a 17-day initial that was going to be pushed off several more months. And that's really where that came from.
Now you're flying with him. Are you giving him dual gibbon when you go over?
Do I log that as dual? I'm not going to say that I'm going to put that in the dual gibbon category. We're just, it's going to be something where we're moving the airplane, and we're just going to burn some holes in the sky on our way from point A to point B that we were flying anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good. Really, it's the steep turns and the stall sequence, of which we'll do a little higher than we did them in a
So you're gonna practice stalls in a Falcon.
Yep. Which is very docile, by the way.
Hey, let me know when that happens. I'll sit in your jump seat.
That's crazy.
I don't know if insurance will allow you to do that, but
let me know when that happens so I can not be anywhere near the state of California.
We can do it over your house, bro. Well, thanks.
Speaking of which, Alex, what do you know about French Valley? You flying out of there?
I used to instruct out of there. Why?
Can I get a 650 in there?
Possibly. How long do you guys need to land?
How long do I need to land?
Yeah,
I can
runway length.
6,000 feet.
I can stop it in 3,500 feet.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've seen Gulfstreams in and out of there before.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. We cannot go in the 650. There's a rather significant weight restriction.
Oh, for the condition of the runway and taxiway.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
Something that you got to take with that plane. But we had he had something, and I think it was in Temecula. This was just like 2 days ago. And he wanted to go. I was like, yeah, because I've been to French Valley a few times. So like, yeah, that's fine. And then I looked up the numbers because this is something you got to pay attention to now. That's not going to work.
So that's interesting because
close.
We don't worry about that stuff. That's dispatch and SOC, and that's all scheduled operations.
And again, that's something, and it's not really something that's come up before. But as soon as you get into something, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know how much you guys know about corporate airplane. We have the Falcon 2000, and then we have the Falcon 900. I don't know what you guys know about a Falcon 900. It's classified in most places as a large corporate jet
because of the 3 engines, or
just because it's fairly sizable.
Oh,
I mean, from it, the size standpoint of it. However, which is the same category as the Gulfstream, and yet the max gross takeoff weight of the Falcon 900 is 49,000 pounds. We can carry 48,000 pounds of just gas in the Gulfstream. And so there is a huge discrepancy, even though they're in the same quote unquote category. Yeah. There's a huge difference in the capabilities and the weight. And so these things that you never really worried about before, all of a sudden you've got an airplane capable of taking off at 104,000 pounds. That's a huge difference than 49,000 pounds. And so the rules are going to be different.
Yeah.
And there's all these numbers that I'd never heard of before that now, I'm like the only person that pays attention to them when it comes to the Gulfstream. And
that's why you're running a Part 91 airline.
Well, and I think that it was probably beneficial before we even had the Gulfstream. It was kind of a side note story, I guess. We went to, was it Lakefront? I think it's called Lakefront in New Orleans, where we go somewhat regularly for customs purposes to clear customs coming back from the Caribbean. And apparently what I had heard happen, there's a G4 on the ramp over there. And somehow it had not been communicated that the evening crew had fueled the airplane, and then the morning crew came out and fueled the airplane.
Oh, Jesus.
And there was a G4 literally sunk into the ramp.
Wow.
Like into the concrete on the ramp.
Yeah. Well, the asphalt.
That turned obviously into a huge ordeal. I was not anything part of that, and we left. But that memory has kind of been imprinted into my mind, kind of seeing that firsthand. It's like, okay, this is real. Like, I have seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to what the concrete, whatever the formulation, there's all kinds of different stuff that goes into concrete for runways and airports and taxiways and ramps. Will it support the airplane? Because God forbid I be that guy, that's not flying around, we're going to only land with 4,000 pounds of fuel. Now I'm the guy that's got a $50 million jet sinking into concrete.
Right.
Because that's a totally different discussion.
And to be fair, I think the Gulfstreams that I used to see flying in and out there weren't 650s. They're probably not. They're probably 4s or 3s.
Yeah.
So
3s you probably could have heard coming. Even the 4s. I mean, the 5 is still a pretty big airplane. The 4s, I don't know very much about G4s, but even the G5 is a 90,000 pound airplane. It's
it's hard to believe how heavy they are.
Yeah, I'm looking up French Valley's weight capacity, and it says you guys, I'm assuming, are double wheeled on the mains, right? And it says 58.0. Is that 58,000 pounds? That's what it's limited to?
58,000 pounds. And so our basic operating weight's right about 54.
Got it. So you could take off and land there with no fuel.
Well, if one could figure out how to take off with no fuel, we could do it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I just ixnayed that whole thing and said no.
Well, you could. I got it. I know how you could do this the next time. When you go in there, right? Obviously, you got to get down to about 58,000 pounds, so you got to burn.
I'm gonna. You know how to do it? I get robbed to fuel plant.
Hey, I'm good at it.
That's why I'd have you do it,
man.
Yeah,
I'll never make
fuel
that
plant it and shuttle approach it.
If the airline managers and the airline CEOs could have their way, they'd have every single flight land with zero fuel, because that would be the most. You want extra fuel for? Just land with zero fuel. Just plan it correctly, and that would be very efficient. So you guys figure out how to do that, and you'll probably
I got the perfect idea for
you'll probably
Roger.
disappear.
You just got to get it in so you're below 58,000 pounds. You don't take off with much more fuel. March is just like a stone's throw away. You go meet up with one of the refueling tankers that are up there, and there you go. You got it.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah. Like, I see no problem with that whatsoever.
I like it. I want to see it. You make sure you put it on YouTube.
But so anyway, that's it. And that just kind of, again, as an aside note, it's another thing. Okay, we can't take this airplane in. What are we going to do? And so then there's more aircraft swaps. It wasn't so much a swap as having a plane fly back, because we're going to use one of the smaller airplanes. And so it's going to need to fly back from somewhere else so they can fly this other trip, because the 650 is too big to go into the requested airport.
Yeah. Kind
of shuffling that schedule around again. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
And that's why you're always on the phone and at all hours. And I don't know how you do it. That is
one thing I will say about the evening podcast. The phone is much quieter in the evening. It has not buzzed once.
Oh, good.
But it's been almost 2 hours now.
Duly noted.
Good.
Yeah. Now, Alex.
Yes.
I know you've had some time off. You had 6 days off in a row. But you also were junior manned over Christmas, and then you got stuck in Lexington because of something called NOTAM?
NOTAM. NOTAM.
So first, let's talk about your junior man. How did you get junior manned? What's going on here?
So I had a trip over Christmas. I don't even know how it happened, of what imploded or how it got canceled, but all the trips just blend together at this point. But I remember we were in Little Rock, and once we got to Little Rock, everyone was kind of checking their schedules, figuring out what time for the next day. And one of the flight attendants goes, "Oh, holy shit, our Chicago to Cincinnati flight got canceled."
Okay.
So we had needed to go up to Chicago the next morning. So we're like, okay, well, let's figure it out. Let's, we'll wake up in the morning and figure out what we're doing on our schedules. And that next day, all four of us were off on different planes when we got to Chicago.
Wow.
So they reassigned us. It's not a big deal. I get it. Reassignments are going to happen when a flight cancels or whatever. But I ended up getting basically doing a Lexington. Was it Lexington? Yeah, Lexington turn out of Chicago. And then I would have been deadheading from Chicago back to Dallas on Christmas Eve. Well, we had a huge delay. This was that whole story of where we were way overweight on fuel, and we had to fly the full approach. I think I said that story. So
you told us about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So because of that, I missed my deadhead home, and they were like, well, you're junior man. We're going to have to junior man you into the next day. And I was like, okay. So I stayed, they got me a hotel in Chicago, and then I left the next morning to go home. Well, because of that, because I was junior man, I was able to get either, there's a few different ways that you could do it. You can do 200% pay. You can do this. And I was like, well, screw that. I'm going to take a day off. I was talking with one of my captains about it, because he was like, yeah, you're owed a day off. I was like, okay. So he's like, make it the most inconvenient for the company. Like, you want it to be this day, make it the most inconvenient by choosing other parts of trips that are inconvenient, so you get the exact day you want. And I was like, cool. So it just ended up working out where I had a 2-day trip, which, because I was junior manned, I had them kill that 2-day trip. So now I have 6 days off in a row with pay for 2 of those days.
Okay. That's good. So now, are you an internationally qualified pilot, or is it just all domestic?
No, we do. We're Canada and Mexico. So
you don't have different divisions over at Sandpiper?
No, it's all, you all basically just, if you're assigned to a Mexico trip, you go to Mexico. You're assigned Canada, you go to Canada. Most of it's all in the States otherwise.
Yeah. So you've made this work for you. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, it's been interesting lately with this NOTAM. We're going to talk about the FAA outage. We've already kind of talked about that in a past podcast, but we have some new information that we're going to discuss in just a little bit. And we're going to talk about a news article that's not even a news article. It's a Substack. So it's someone who wrote an editorial about EKGs and pilots and how the FAA Aero Medical Board has changed requirements. And why did they do this? This went all over social media. And when we were talking about it before the show, Roger got very upset. He's like, this guy. And we're going to find out exactly what we're talking about here right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, as we promised, we have a few articles we're going to talk about today. It's going to be maybe 2 or 3 articles, but I know Rob has a very early wake up time.
I do.
Where did you say you were? Aspen?
I'm in DC.
You're in DC. Roger's in Aspen. Oh, okay, so you're in DC. You look out. Make sure they're not bugging your room. Did you sweep the room for bugs?
Yeah. Well, nobody's knocked on the door yet for those documents. So
yeah. I would just flush those down the toilet, man. Don't don't get caught with those, man.
Yeah, man.
But thank you so much for joining us.
All right,
and get your rest.
All right, we'll do. Hey, before I go, I just forgot one thing. I want to give a shout out to a listener, and he's a newly minted FO at Envoy. So, Alex, you have a little bit of ground support over there. My buddy Ernie just passed his check ride, and he's going to start IOE here pretty soon. Long time coming for him. He and I worked in the Air National Guard together back in Arizona, and he worked really hard to get to where he's at, and he's finally one of us. I mean,
well, congratulations to Ernie.
Yeah, we'll have to have him on the show at some point. He's a pretty cool cat. So we'll have to bring him on the show and talk to him about how he got there. So
very interesting. I'd love it.
All right, fellas.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good night.
All right. Take care. See ya.
Congrats.
Hey, Rob.
Thanks.
And then there were 3.
Exactly. And then there were 3. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging in there. Now, earlier I alluded to the fact that, we wanted to talk about this Substack article that went all over social media. And you got to be careful nowadays, ladies and gentlemen, what you deem just because it's in print somewhere or online somewhere doesn't make it 100% factual. A lot of this stuff, even when it's from someone who's a conspiracy therapist, there might be truth to it, but let's dig into really what's going on here. And what I wanted to do is just kind of explore a little bit and do a little bit of an analysis on a Substack by Steve Kirsch. I think that's how you say it. It's Steve Kirsch. It even got on Fox News. So his Substack has gotten a little bit of momentum. It circulated online. And what we're talking about here is an article that's entitled, "The FAA has very quietly, tactily admitted that the EKGs of pilots are no longer normal. We should be concerned. Very concerned," he says. In his Substack, he says that after the vaccine rolled out, the FAA quietly widened the EKG parameter range for pilots so they wouldn't be grounded. Kirsch claims that the vax gave at least 50 million Americans heart damage. He went on to write that in October of 2022, the version of the FAA Guide for Aviation Medical Examiners was changed, and the FAA quietly widened the EKG parameters beyond the normal range that went from a PR max of 0.2 to 0.3. This is a significant change in range for an EKG, and it was done after the vaccine rollout, Kirsch says. They did it hoping that nobody would notice. Dun, dun, dun. It worked for a while. Nobody caught on. But you can't hide things for long. This is a tacit admission from the U.S. government that the COVID vaccine has damaged the hearts of our pilots. Not just a few pilots, a lot of pilots, and a lot of damage. But cardiac harm is not limited to just pilots. By Kirsch's best guess, over 50 million Americans sustained some kind of heart damage from the vaccine. That's a lot of people who would be very upset when they realized the vaccine that they took to reduce their chance of dying from COVID actually worked in reverse. He claims that it made people more likely to get COVID, to be hospitalized from COVID or other diseases, to die from COVID and other diseases, and also is an excellent chance of getting a lifetime heart damage for no extra charge. He also goes on to say, but don't worry, you can't sue them. That's because the laws were fixed so that the doctors, the drug companies, and the government are not liable. After all, you took the vaccine on your own free will. It's not like you were forced or coerced to take it or anything like that. And there were plenty of people warning you not to take the shot, even though they were censored. In his article, he explains that the evidence and the thinking behind his claims, and he actually got some airtime on Fox when Tucker Carlson caught on to Steve's Substack with a report on his show.
So I was looking at some of the stuff on what they're saying of the PR on this, and the PR it's the interval measured at the beginning of the P wave, which if you look at an EKG, it's the little like speed bump before the giant mountain,
right?
And in a normal person, it's supposed to be somewhere between 1.2 to 2.5. But to us pilots, we're held to a 0.2 milliseconds.
Right.
So I mean, that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference from 0.2 milliseconds, which is within the normal range, to now something that's outside of the normal range, which is 0.3. And we're going to talk a little bit about what cardiologist Thomas Levy said on the subject, but here is what Tucker Carlson has to say.
And yet here's something pretty amazing that happened without much notice at all, without any explanation publicly. The FAA just made a major change in the health requirements for pilots with heart damage. The FAA has significantly broadened the acceptable EKG range for commercial pilots. Steve Kirsch reported this on his Substack. Now, the change now allows people with injured hearts, cardiac injury, to fly. Now, the FAA made this change last October, just after the vaccines were rolled out and made mandatory. Why? Well, we reached out to the FAA today for an explanation. They claim they, quote, follow standard processes based on data and science, whatever that means. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long is an Army flight surgeon. She joins us tonight to assess. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on. So this, raised some red flags, I would say, for people, given what's at stake in commercial air travel. Why do you think the FAA did this?
Is very obscure because extending the PR interval from the acceptable range of 120 to 200 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds does not improve safety. And I would like to see the data and the research that they based that decision on. In aviation, we are a data-driven institution, and everything centers around risk mitigation. So making that broader actually puts the public at greater risk of a pilot having a cardiac event that didn't get caught because they've extended that range.
So, that's inexplicable. Everything the FAA does, as you just said, has to be designed with one goal in mind, and that's the safest possible flight. Commercial, military pilot. And pilots think that way. So there is no way, in your opinion as a flight surgeon, that this change, whatever its cause, could make air travel safer.
No, and in light of the emerging and overwhelming data that is showing the cardiac damage from COVID and the COVID vaccines on cardiac muscle, I can't imagine why they would make this move. And I think it's a question that really should be taken to Dr. Susan Northrup. She's the senior flight surgeon for the FAA, and ask what data they use to support this. And I think it only undermines aviation safety. If you realize that in the military, pilots receive an EKG every year, whereas for commercial air, they receive it at 35 and then at 40 and every year annually after age 40. So those are, we hardly see them to begin with in terms of a 5-year gap in there. And
Right. So I mean, this is baffling. I'm sorry, I think there's an audio delay, but let me just say I appreciate your confirming what seems like common sense, that there's no good answer for why they're doing this, and we are going to follow up Dr. Teresa Long and ask to interview the head flight surgeon at FAA, because maybe we're missing something. Doesn't sound like.
So interesting what she had said about EKGs. Now, do we know why the FAA changed this measure? It might have absolutely nothing to do with a vaccine or COVID. We have no idea why. They have not released a statement. They did do it quietly, which as a government agency to do something quietly is interesting. The Substack, I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll also put a link for that Twitter feed where the clip from Tucker Carlson came from. And the interesting part is there's about an hour-long video where Mr. Kirsch interviewed a cardiologist, Thomas Levy, on the subject. And it's just way too long to discuss here. But I will leave you with something that was... he did mention something that I thought of, actually, when we heard about the Envoy pilot that had a massive heart attack during his IOE. We talked about this a couple shows ago. There was a Envoy upgrading captain who was in the left seat on takeoff roll out of Chicago, and he suddenly had a massive, I don't think it was a heart attack. Do you remember, Alex, what it was labeled as? A cardiac?
I think it was a cardiac infraction. I think it was a blood clot that went through and caused the issue, not an actual heart attack. Speculation's still out on that. And I know they still got to do the reports, but that was from what I remember. It wasn't an actual heart problem.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I actually flew with a captain who knew the guy who was in training with him. And he was the type of guy that was, yeah, I'll go out to dinner with you guys, but I'm going to work out first. He's prior military. He was in like super fit shape. So for him to have that, it was like a huge shock to everybody who knew him from class.
Yeah, because there was a lot of talk about it being possibly myocarditis. And I know Roger's going to put in his 2 cents here, but before we get to that, let's see what cardiologist Thomas Levy said in his interview with Mr. Kirsch.
We need to talk about the fact that not with all myocardial cells, but with a lot of them, when you make them inflamed, you make them electrically unstable. And what does that mean? That's just the prototype for smoldering inflammation, and then an acute event, stress, a surge of adrenaline or epinephrine whenever you get excited, or whenever an airline pilot hits a stressful situation, and boom, that's like gasoline on smoldering coals. And you can go from something that wasn't even causing you symptoms to a sudden heart arrhythmia, possibly to the degree of fatality. It all depends. It could be any degree. It could be just a few extra beats, or it could be a ventricular tachycardia, or it could be a ventricular fibrillation. But it's not just the long-term effects of having inflammation in the heart, because you will lose heart muscle over time. Your heart will get weaker and weaker and weaker over time the longer you let it stay in an inflamed state. But you also need to realize that any acute adrenaline type of stress can precipitate an abnormal, potentially fatal arrhythmia as long as that condition persists.
So I found this interesting. I'm not saying that this article is 100% accurate, and because it is, hasn't been admitted by like all the government organizations out there, the CDC, the World Health Organization, that we actually have these kind of heart damage caused by a vaccine. However, if you listen to enough people, there are enough people out there, enough doctors, enough professionals, enough scientists out there that have been talking about injured hearts, arrhythmias, murmurs that have developed. And really, this doctor said it, there's really no way to, without equivocally to say 100% that this is what's happening. But it was interesting. And when the FAA changed that, it basically put up kind of a flag. Why did they do that? Now, Roger, when we were talking before the show, you said, man, if we talk about this, I'm going to freaking lose my shit, man. Why did you say that?
I don't even know if I want to talk about this.
She's like, I don't even want to talk about it. But see, there are pilots out there that believe this. They saw this on social media and they're like, oh yeah, we're all gonna die.
That's the problem. That's the problem. And I can't even decide whether I don't even know how I have no idea how this is gonna come out. The fact that we're even I don't even know how I feel about the fact that you're sharing it, because what is happening right now is you've got a known vaccine super spreader that we are now bringing onto this podcast on aviation, who is not a scientist, who is not a pilot, who is a tech entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And yet here we are. And the fact that we're even dignifying this with airtime, I find ridiculous.
Now, I apologize if I come across as like this is happening. What I wanted to do,
I know why you did it, because like you said, which is why I'm not totally, against it. There are obviously people out there that believe, and people that believe this, and even more important than those people, there are a lot of people that are pilots, because this is an aviation, pilots who are going to see this and who may get scared. There could be passengers, which is really why this was on Tucker Carlson. Passengers that get scared. But I mean, going back to that Tucker Carlson thing is like, okay, there is nothing that I can see that makes this safer.
Yeah.
That's asinine. That is an asinine statement that we are making. We're not worried about that. We're worried about, is this going to make anything less safe? And if you go back and you look at this, okay, and you go with, some cardiologists look at some things, and most notably in this case, we're looking at the PR interval from the time that the electrical signal goes from the top of the heart and gets to the bottom of the heart. Is there anything that's going to make pilots, aircraft, commercial flying less safe because of this increased interval? And the cardiologists have said no. That's why they changed this. If you go back into the information, that's what the FAA has said, is because there is no documented safety issue and a difference between moving it from 200 to 300. If you look at a young, healthy athlete, they could be up to a normal interval could go up to 400 milliseconds.
Oh, wow.
So 300 could still be somewhat conservative for the vast amount of the population. So that's number one. Number two, when did this change take place? Last October?
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys working at massive airlines, especially Tony, did you see a lot of people that were all of a sudden without a medical because they exceeded 200
Well, I have
milliseconds?
no idea. I have absolutely no clue.
You haven't? I don't know of any.
Yeah.
And yet this guy is claiming that 50 million Americans, of which how many X percentage of those are going to be pilots, all of a sudden we have to secretly increase that interval because all these people are actually damaged, but we don't know anybody that lost their medical because their PR interval all of a sudden after getting a vaccine has now increased. We're just moving this because, look, we have some cardiologists that have looked at this data, which if I had to guess, no, I do not know this for sure. But if I had to guess, this was something that they've been looking at for years. Okay, the cardiologists, we know that when a lot of these aviation medical guidelines came out, they were based on military aviators. Can we agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She even said that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, that's what we based most of our guidelines on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we've got a pilot shortage. We've got all these other people that are out there. Maybe these people are just as normal as everybody else. And just because they don't have a 200 millisecond PR interval, maybe 300 is okay. Okay. Well, we better study that. And you go and you look at this data over the course of the year, and okay, there's a lot of people that maybe they're between 200 and 300. There's no adverse events, assuming they have no other symptoms. That's obviously going to be another big thing that any doctor, any cardiologist is going to. I mean, do you have other symptoms? Because just because you have a longer interval there doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It could be. But if you have an additional issue with that heart inflammation that the guy was talking about, which is going to interrupt your the electrical impulses going through your heart. Yes, that could be an indicator of a problem, but you're probably going to have other symptoms. This is not going to make anything safer, but it's not going to make anything less safe either, which is the criteria that we're looking for. I mean, why don't we just make it 175? Well, if you're 200, sorry.
Yeah. But, in statistics in college, I remember that we could debate the same statistics on both sides. And then one had to debate the pros of this statistic and one had to debate the argument against the statistic using the same exact numbers. And what I learned then at the age of 19 years old, whatever I was when I was a freshman in college, was the numbers don't lie, but how you interpret them is completely up to you. And you can use the same numbers to argue against one another. So, of view. Yeah, be careful. The whole point of this story that I brought this up, I didn't know that Roger would be so passionate about, bringing this on.
I am passionate
and I am
about
not
medicine.
I think it's very important to realize that when you're in a field where it is, and Alex has said this before too, you're in a field where keeping a medical until the age of now 65 is a condition of employment. And that's rare. You rarely have that in other professions where if you don't pass your FAA medical certificate and you don't pay us $140 every time you come in here or whatever it is, then you're going to be grounded. I mean, so it's kind of a big deal. Now, the question is why? And we don't know exactly why. It's interesting to see that there's different ranges. And, one guy says, well, it's significant. Roger, you're telling me that 0.4 and above is quite normal for the range of the PR in an athletic.
You're looking at a young, healthy athlete where those intervals can be a little bit longer, not for the general population. Mm-hmm. But just when you look, you can't look at just basic numbers because they're going to be a normal is going to be a wide range depending on the individual. Yeah. And I think that us taking the data over the course of time and not just saying that, hey, here's a military aviator and looking at a range based on data. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't see the issue with that. It's because otherwise everything that we change from here on out, whether it's one way or the other, anyone can grab this and go take it to the news and take it to the media for the sensationalist stupidity that we have.
It's funny you say that, the sensationalist part of it, because what I really wanted to get across was, we get a lot of our news from social media now. We're not sitting here watching one of the 5M or the mass media news outlets much anymore, because for one, who watches local news or has cable? We're all on the go. We're all on the internet, and most of us get our news from our phones. And the dangerous part of that is sometimes you'll get articles that are out there that you have to absolutely look at the source. And just because they're mainstream doesn't mean they're accurate, nor does it mean they're accurate if there's some obscure reporting. Now, in all fairness, let's see what Wikipedia has to say about the author of this Substack, Stephen Todd Kirsch. He is an American entrepreneur. He has started several companies, and he was one of the two people who independently invented the optical mouse. He has been both a philanthropic supporter of medical research and a promoter of misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines. That's the first paragraph of his Wikipedia page. So before you get an article out there and you're like, oh, this must be true, it's on the internet, maybe you want to do a little bit of research before you share it, like it, and spread it. I got to admit, I read it and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if there's truth to this. And as we were doing the research for this show and we start talking about it before the show, we got Roger's response. And I am really grateful that you're on the show today, because you really have brought a little bit of light to me, and I'm sure some of the listeners out there as well, that maybe loosening something allows more people to fly airplanes. And the reason for loosening this EKG guidance is because they've determined that everyone that they maybe is outside that range, maybe 2.5 on the PR,
are no less safe than anybody.
They go get all these medical examinations and go to a cardiologist and get all this testing done, and then they come back going, no, they're fine. So they get some kind of special issuance so that they can be outside of the range, and that's just a giant waste of money. Now, mind you, we've talked about this for years now. What makes airlines run? What makes the government run? Liability and nothing else. Liability before money, before profits. Every decision made at mainline carriers has liability as the number one reasoning behind doing something. And I think that the FAA would not have changed anything if there was a risk of some kind of liability that, hey, you're doing this because of what? Because
two things to this, right? So I'm just getting my first EKG this last medical, right? 35, you have to do your first one.
Yeah.
I was vaccinated because of the military. I had to, and my EKG came back normal. Now, I don't necessarily believe all the hubbub that the vaccines are causing all these myocardial infractions or anything like that, or that, Damar Hamlin was the reason why he, passed out on the field was because, he got the COVID vaccine. No, he took a hard football hit straight to the chest, and it was a freak play. But I mean, the thing that I do have to agree on is the thought that here the FAA is secretly or quietly, as he says it, raising these limits. How much more are they going to raise these limits? And for the passenger's sake, if they come to a point where it's putting this information out on Tucker Carlson or stuff like that, like how much are people going to freak out going, well, is my pilot safe? Is he this? Is he that? Like, are we gonna be, having to go back to the gate because here he is 55 years old and healthy, and he has a heart attack on takeoff roll and has to have the IOE check airman bring him back to the gate in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
how much is that going to deter people from flying now?
See, and that's what we have to be careful of is go, see, there's proof. No, there's no, are you their doctor? Are you, you don't, it's easy to fall for these kind of things. Just be careful. I'm not saying that the article is completely false, and I'm not saying the article is very, very true. I'm just saying, hey, this information's out there. We have to be careful and know your source, and it's commentary. Keep an open mind. Yeah, it's probably, I always say that, whenever, what do you think it is? I always say, well, usually it's a little bit of both. Just in general, it's a little bit of both. Could there be people that have been injured from taking it? Absolutely. Could there be people that were absolutely not? Absolutely. But until we know unequivocally, and we have multiple sources coming up with a definition or an explanation that we can all agree upon, just be careful what you spread out there.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Speaking of spreading, something spread pretty quickly.
Yeah,
killed a couple weeks ago. Killed your trip. The notices to air missions, or notices to airmen. So those things that are just a bunch of garbage.
That's what NOTAMs are. They're just a bunch of garbage that nobody pays any attention to.
What happens is, again, liability, right? So you have these NOTAMs that before you go on a flight, you're responsible to read the NOTAMs, because what if the ILS is not working or something when you get there and you're dependent on, the 200-foot minimums because of the weather. And then you get there and you realize, oh, by the way, a glide slope's out of service. So now you have an MDA that's much higher, 400 feet, and you're not going to be able to get in there. Well, I should have then had a alternate, right? Or whatever. So
if only there was something that told us all of that.
It's called a NOTAM, right?
Oh.
Well, the NOTAM went down, and this was like a week after Southwest had their whole meltdown. And the memes just came flying, and everybody was looking at these memes going, Southwest has a debacle after a software issue and cancels thousands of flights. And the FAA says, all right, hold my beer, watch this. In a story from NPR, entitled "Contractors Unintentionally Grounded Thousands of Flights Last Week When They Deleted Files While Working on the Notice to Air Missions System," the Federal Aviation Administration says. I'll put a link in the show notes from the NPR article, but it basically says that the agency in a statement on Thursday said that the preliminary review found the shutdown happened as the contractors worked to correct synchronization between live primary databases and backup databases. Investigators so far found no evidence of malicious intent or a cyber attack. NOTAM is used by the FAA to notify pilots and airports of any potential flight hazards. The FAA says that it has taken steps to make the system more resilient, though the statement did not specify those measures. NOTAMs went dark late on Tuesday, January 10th, sparking safety concerns by the time morning began on the East Coast. The FAA ordered a nationwide pause on domestic flight departures. By 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the system had been fully restored and flights began to resume. But the system failure caused airlines to cancel more than 1,300 flights and delay nearly 10,000 more. Senator Ted Cruz, on January 11th, attacked the nationwide disruption as completely unacceptable and the latest example of dysfunction within the Department of Transportation. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg defended the shutdown after services were restored that Wednesday. When there's a problem with a government system, we're going to own it, we're going to find it, and we're going to fix it, Buttigieg said. In this case, we had to make sure that there was complete confidence about safety and flight operations, which is why there was a conservative but important step to have a pause that made sure that everything was back up and running. Now, were airplanes going to fall out of the sky if they didn't have NOTAMs?
No.
But would the liability then fall on the FAA if something were to have happened and the pilots or the airlines or the airport said, well, we didn't know about it because the NOTAM system was down, so now you're responsible. So it was it was a lawyer move, honestly.
And I completely 100% get it. And I know why that they put the pause on the system and all that stuff. But I mean, in all honesty, how much is going to change between when they say it shut down that night before to that morning? Like, generally NOTAMs are posted, I think they can go up to 30 days in advance. So like if you're looking at an ILS system being out, you're going to know that system's going to be out days, if not weeks prior to you coming in.
Yeah,
now,
but you're not going to check that NOTAM days and weeks. You're scheduled to fly that evening, or maybe 20 minutes before the flight. You check the NOTAM.
Well, and the filters on our software, I don't know if yours does it, but like our filter basically filters it to the pertinent stuff for that flight. Now, granted, sometimes it's a little tedious filtering through all of that shit, but you are supposed to check them and you are supposed to look through them. But I agree with the conservative approach to it's better to be safe than sorry and not have, that unlit tower that you're not going to see now, be completely protected. And Tony's smiling because he saw all the memes that I saw too. I was marked safe from the unlit tower.
Exactly.
And then there was the one with Alec Guinness, and just like that, several thousand unlit towers cried out in help.
Roger, did you have any problems with NOTAMs?
No, fortunately, we only had one flight that went out that day, and it left after everything had been lifted by several hours, so they were not affected at all.
Well, it killed my trip. We were supposed to have a 6 a.m. departure, 6:20 departure that morning to go to Chicago. And the saving grace is we had a maintenance issue that kind of caused us to be delayed for a couple hours. But by the time our maintenance issue got fixed, our flight was canceled for the day. So I got a lost day in Lexington out of it.
And the funny thing is, I'm flying with a Czech Airman this last week. Really nice guy. And we got along great. We're up there telling stories and telling jokes. And I thought he was a real top-notch pilot. He was just doing his 1 month on the line, and then he was going to go back to Dallas to go be a Czech Airman in the sim. And we were talking about the approach coming into Ontario on 26 right. And he's doing the approach briefing before top of descent. He's talking about the arrival, and he's talking about the ILS and how it's going to be visual, but at night we back it up with the ILS, and he's going over all the information. And he goes, I just threw the decision altitude in there just for fun. And he reads the number, and I go, oh, you mean, I forget what it is, like 1,128 feet or whatever it is. And he goes, oh, is there a NOTAM on that? I'm like, yes, there is. We were just laughing because there's a NOTAM on there instead of 200 above field elevation. It's actually 250 feet above field elevation. I don't know why, but it's NOTAM 5A for the airport. Yeah,
because that's important for
Yeah, well, if you're coming down to minimums and you just inadvertently go down to 200 feet and go, runway inside land, what's going to happen? Oh man. Well, last story. I know it's getting late for some of you guys, so let's wrap it up, shall we? Last story. We've been talking about what's been going on with Southwest, their meltdown. We actually talked about that a couple shows ago. It ended up being a software issue with outdated software from the 90s, and it finally just gave up. And it caused delays and cancellations for days. Well, according to an article from simpleflying.com, Southwest Airlines will pay $45 million in bonuses to their staff who worked during the Christmas meltdown. Amid continued fallout from its catastrophic meltdown last month, Southwest Airlines has agreed to compensate its pilots as a way to say thank you. The airline also plans to pay other employees who worked through the nightmare. Southwest said it will pay millions of dollars in bonuses that they call gratitude pay to employees who worked during the December 20th and January 3rd timeframes. The penalty that nearly 17,000 flights canceled during that busy holiday travel season surrounding Christmas has reportedly cost the carrier between $725 million and $825 million. Southwest Airlines Pilots Association, or SWAPA, of the nearly 10,000 pilots voted to accept the pay bonus on Thursday, including extra pay already given for the holidays and reassignment pay. The union will receive an estimated $45 million in additional pay, which equals about $4,500 per pilot.
Hey, I mean, you know what? At least they're doing the right thing and giving compensation to the people. But I think Southwest shot themselves in the foot with this one. I don't know.
I think they'll recover. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh no, that's it. This is the end of Southwest." They can't do this during a holiday and think they're. I think they'll be just fine.
Well, Southwest has kind of been the golden child of aviation, where, oh, hey, you sucked out a passenger and, you had to emergency decompression and get down and all that good stuff. Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll still fly you. If that happened on American or Delta or United, people would be boycotting the airlines and, I
don't know.
Southwest.
We live in a different
Southwest
time.
Can do no wrong, in my opinion.
There's no loyalty anymore. People, they have the remembrance of a goldfish 15 seconds later, and they'll believe anything in 15 seconds and they'll forget anything in 15 seconds. Oh yeah, we have to, I don't know. I think we definitely have to hold companies, organizations, and governments to a high standard.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. We're in an industry where safety is paramount. And when things go right, things go right. It's a nice job. It's easy. It's relaxing. But when things go wrong, we earn our pay maybe in the matter of just one flight for the year. We earn that pay because
we're not paid to get you up in the air. We're paid to bring you down to the ground.
Yeah, that was my favorite line that your dad had said about the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist, they're not paid to put you to sleep. They're paid to wake you back up. That was fantastic. And then he said, and pilots are the same. We're not paid to take you up in the air and fly you there. We're paid to get you back down safely.
Yeah.
So I think Southwest is going to do just fine. It's nice that they're giving a bonus. They're throwing a bone to their pilot group, trying to keep them happy during a contract negotiation, just to make sure that they're doing okay. And they're getting close. Before the show, we were kind of talking about what we've heard for a while now. We've been talking about all these airlines that are under contract negotiations, Section 6. And it sounds like Alaska's getting close. They're going to sign a TA. Looks like Delta, their TA has gone to a vote, and looks like it's going to pass and go to the membership for a vote. Who else was it? Spirit
I think the latest that I saw was they had like all but 3 of their MECs voted yes on it. So it's going to their pilots at this point for Delta. So, and then Alaska, I think you said?
Yeah, Alaska, I heard. I read something about that. And then, and again, if you want to keep up with all this, it's not really about, it is related to a career in aviation. Obviously, it affects all of us. Whoever gets the best contract is going to have their pick of pilots going, I want to work there. We've seen that years ago with Southwest. We saw it with UPS. That was the premier place to go. JetBlue for a while. That was the premier place to go. Right now, it's kind of up in the air because 12 U.S. carriers are all under contract negotiations for pay, and in a post-pandemic environment and economy, the longer they drag this out, the better for the airline companies, because they're just waiting for the economy to collapse so that they can go, well, we're ready to talk now.
Well, and you had said it. I think you said it when we were doing the thing with my dad. Like basically every major right now is in contract negotiation. It's just who's getting theirs out first.
Yeah. And Roger is under contract negotiations continuously.
Yeah. Roger's like, thank God I don't have to deal with this shit again.
Oh man. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending the time with me. I know today's show we kind of talked about some interesting topics, and we were doing a catch up of what everyone's been up to. It was so nice to have everyone on, and Rob as well. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, no, that's why we do it, why we're here. I'm glad that we could all get all 4 of us on. It was awesome. Know that Roger's still alive at some point.
Still here.
He's
working hard.
Quietly in the dark, watching, learning, destroying.
Well, he's in a good place right now. He's in a place where the beer flows like wine and the women flock instinctively like the salmon of Capistrano.
How poetic.
Wow. Did you just make that up?
No, that was completely from Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, okay. Any last topics, guys? Roger, do you have anything you want to add or anything?
I do want to just, I don't know, in my wisdom, I just wanted to pass on something to Alex since he said it twice. It's an infarction, not an infraction. An infarction is something that blocks blood flow to an organ, which then kills it.
Oh.
Because without the oxygen and blood, but infarction. Typically, like you might see it as an MI, a myocardial infarction. A heart attack.
Got it.
But it can also be a stroke is also one.
And an infraction is part of a fraction.
It's like a penalty.
Well,
we got AR versus RA. But anyway.
Hey, my brain just reads it as,
well, I kind of, the first time I didn't really think much about it, and then you said it again.
I heard it too, but I didn't want to correct him. Because
well, thanks. Now you guys making me sound like a fucking idiot on this show.
That's why I said,
no.
Like,
you made yourself sound like a fucking idiot.
I'm going to educate him.
Yeah, well,
I'm an educator.
I say it wrong twice, and then now Roger has to come back and be like, no. You said it wrong twice now.
Twice.
Yeah. He does the same with me. That's good. I'd rather he'd correct me right away, but as long as he tells me about it.
You corrected right away?
Yeah. Yeah, you could have. No, that's the
shin.
That's the signal for I need ground power. You can't do that because then I'm going to look at you like.
Oh yeah, ground power, air. Yeah. But don't do disconnect the air, and don't do
technical foul.
Technical foul.
You could, if you did this like timeout, I could understand that. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, let's just wrap it up before we get too out of hand here. Thank you so much to Roger, to Rob, to Alex for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed listening to our flight today. And I hope you pay it forward. Share this podcast with your friends and your family if you like it. Please subscribe and follow to the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. And send us a review. They don't have to be all perfect 5 stars and it's the best podcast ever. But, if you're so inclined, we'd love to receive some of those. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even an audio file right on our website. And that's at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. We're also on the social media platforms. Unfortunately, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram users, you guys can follow us on, just look up Squawk Ident Podcast. One final thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe. And take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
Meow.
Where is he? Where is he?
You're on guard.
There he is. Roger, you're going to start sending me your tail numbers and I can start flight awareing you because I could have sworn I heard you the other day.
You might have.
Yeah. I was like, Roger, is that you?
You should have just asked. Be like, Roger? Well, see, that's the thing with aviation. I've realized that too many people are named Roger. You check onto a center frequency.
Roger. Roger that. Roger that.
I wouldn't know anything about it.
No, I'm Roger Murtaugh. I'm the co-pilot.
My dad says you're lazy.
Can you fly this airplane and land it? No, not a chance. No.
Oh, man.
Not a
Oh,
chance.
yeah.
No,
one of the guys at the gym told me he saw the movie.
Not a chance.
Plane? It's just out now in theaters. Plane? Yeah, it's
Roger.
The plane gets struck by lightning.
Roger. Request vector. Over. What?
Off the building. We haven't done a movie review in a long time.
Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
All right, hold on. I'll press pause. Hold on.
Delete. Best.
We'll make you better. We'll make you better.
Do you know anything about planes?
Oh, jeez. Oh, you kill me. You really do.
Do you know anything about planes?
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me I'm a doctor. No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Do you know anything about planes?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.